make this a little bit higher. I am cutting the collar for this blouse. I'm just doing the collar right now on this table. Let me set up my phone here. Per usual, this tripod is probably gonna fall over a couple times. Either way. All right, so I already have the collar stand right here already cut out. Now this collar is just supposed to be slightly bigger. It's already a giant collar, but the client wants it even bigger than that. So we are going to cut this out to be bigger. So I'm basically just, and then also it has to be like smaller than the collar stand right here pattern, which is why I have this kind of off the fabric a little bit. Either way, I'm just making a collar that is wider here but smaller at the base. Let me see if you guys can see the full cut that I'm doing here. Okay, and then I'm literally kind of using this. I'm gonna point it a little bit more that way. All right, and then I'm just gonna kind of take that off of there because now I kind of know what the sizing is. And again, this is the collar stand. Now I'm just gonna pull that up, kind of go over like that. And then I'm just kind of following the shape of the collar stand, which is just like a curve upward like so, like that, right? So then when I remake this collar and put it on this collar stand, right? Once that's in and out, it's gonna fold over like that. Now, I can show you guys an example, but it's going on, again, it's going on this blouse. So this has like a giant collar that's going to be on here. Actually, maybe I'll show you guys the example. Hold on, let's walk through my store a bit. Let me show you what I am making. Let's see. That way you guys can see the exact shirt that I'm making. Okay, here we go. This is the shirt that I'm making. So you see how big that collar is? The collar that I made, it was close to the size, but I still wanted to be as big as that collar. I made this one for a client a couple weeks ago. Another client saw it and wanted it in this different color, this kind of teal, deep greenish blue color. So this is what I am making. After I finish the collar and the collar stand, I'm gonna go in and sew on that buttonhole onto the top. And then lastly, I'm going to sew on the feathers. Now there's no feathers that match this teal green right here. So I'm actually using black feathers. So the black feathers on the cuff are going to be this color. They're going to be black feathers on the cuff of this top. But we are working on the collar right now. So this is the pattern that I cut for that huge collar. And again, let me just show you guys what I am making, and this is the top that I am making right now. Okay, So let's go to the serger, because that is the machine that I am starting on. Okay, I'm trying to set this up so I can, is this going to let me be great? All right, so I'm going to serge my collar pieces together first. And so I'll show you that while I am doing it. Okay, let me move my pedal a little closer. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do with my collar is I'm going to do right sides facing each other, which look, they already are. And I'm just going to serge the edge of this all the way around. Alright, then I'm going to do the longer end. Now we're going to serge that last side. And then I always serge a little bit to take those corners, to cut those corner serge pieces. The extra thread, and then I throw that into my trash bin on the other side. Like this here, we're gonna cut that, just take that off, throw that into the bin on the other side. So now that we have that collar all serged, I'm gonna make sure I got every end here. Like this looks like that could be a little tighter. Alright, now what I'm going to do is kind of clip into the edge a bit. So that when we fold this the other way, we can get a nice clean edge. So I kind of clip a little bit into the sides at the corners so that when we fold inside out, our corners are pointy. So what I do is cut off that very edge and then just kind of clip into that, so there's not a whole bunch of extra fabric around the corners, so that when we turn this inside out, we can get a nice corner edge there. When you turn it inside out, first thing you're going to do, I take my clear pair of scissors and just poke it through to get the corners up higher. Poke the inside, and you can do this with a pen, you could do it with a pencil, you could do it with the edge of your scissors. Here's a pen, I'm going to try to poke through in there. Of course, not with the ink part out. just to get the corner of the corner of the collar part out. And right now I'm just taking the seam ripper a little bit to see, just kind of pull it up even more, because that point was super dramatic and deep in there. So we're just pulling the fabric out a little bit more to expose that point. Okay, so you see that point there? Now when we iron our collar down, that's going to look really nice and clean, and that point is going to look really nice. Let me make sure I don't have any messages, or yeah, okay. So now for our collar part, that point on that one side is going to look really nice and wide. And when we iron that, that dramatic point is going to be really nice for our blouse. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're just going to roll that inside out, and then we're going to use our little tools to try to get that point up as high and out as we can. So as you see, that much is left. And then first thing I'm going to do with a closed pair of scissors, I'm just going to poke that through and under. And just be delicate. You don't want to rip your fabric, of course. But I'm just going to push that corner up as much as I can with that closed pair of scissors. And then I'm taking the seam ripper and I'm using the pointy side. Also be careful with this, because again, you don't want to tear or rip your fabric. But I'm just like gently pulling out one little corner fabric at a time, just to get that point to be super pointy at the end for our collar. And then I just kind of finagle it and push it a little bit more, because when I iron this, it'll be even more flat, which is what we want. I just want a little bit more of that point to be there, and that's pretty much good enough. As long as it has that dramatic fade to the point. And again, once this is ironed out, that is actually that wide. So now for the collar stand. The collar stand. Let's get our collar stand. Okay, here we go. It's 2 pieces. When you're doing the collar stand, I'm going to switch to the straight stitch machine. So which is over here. So let me turn my table around so I can push. Turn my table so I can switch to my straight stitch machine. Okay, so this is my straight stitch machine, and now I'm going to put the collar on the collar stand. Now, first thing I'm going to do is make sure my machine is fully threaded, which it is, with my deep green. Even though this color is teal, the thread being that deep green is perfectly fine. With my collar stand, you're going to sandwich your collar in your collar stand. So all right, so this is the middle, right, of our collar, right here. I'm gonna put a pin right there just to mark the spot. This is the middle right here. And for our collar stand, you're going to sandwich it with outsides facing each other. I'm also gonna pin the middle of the collar stand to the middle of the collar. Do the same thing on the other side. Now, what you can do is notch when you're cutting your pattern. You can notch the top of the middle I didn't do that, so I was just now I was just folding it in half so that I could put my finger over where the middle part is. But if you haven't been doing this a while, you're going to want to put a pin or a notch where your center of your collar stand is. Now, now that we have this center pinned, I'm also going to pin over here, like in 3 different areas, right? So right here, just so it stays straight the whole time we're sewing it. I'm going to pin there and pin towards the edge of the collar stand as well. Okay, so that's there, and then we're going to do that same thing on the other side. We're just going to pin, mark a couple places so it stays on track while we're sewing. And we're going to pin towards the edge. Now your collar stand should hang over your collar just slightly so that you have that little space for the button to go. FYI, so that's why you're going to see my collar stand goes a little bit past the collar. You see, just a tiny bit past the collar. And for the blouse I'm doing, it probably actually doesn't matter, but I still want it to be properly made. I'm just pushing that collar a little bit further up towards that seam line. I don't know why this is irking me on the other side. Like it's not wanting to pin. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now when I sew this, I'm starting from the bottom of the collar stand. So I'm actually going to sew this like starting from here and then go around the collar stand, and I'm just sandwiching in the collar into the collar stand, and you'll see when I flip that to the other side what that looks like. I'm just pulling it through a little bit. I'm doing about a fourth of an inch. A fourth of an inch seam allowance. And random for the bottom of that part there. I'm just going to my foot is going in reverse on this, so I keep adjusting this. Okay. If you see this on the other side, it's kind of, you see how it was sewing on one side but not on the back side? That's why I just readjusted that, because it wasn't sewing over both sides. I see some comments. Hi. Hi. Can anyone hear her? Y'all can't hear me? Hopefully you can. Y'all can't hear me? If you say no, you're responding to me saying you can't hear me. Huh. Can you hear me now? Hello, hello. Now I can. Okay. Maybe that was my headphones that were accidentally connected. Okay. So y'all didn't hear me that whole time I was talking and walking you through how I was doing this? But yeah, I was saying, I noticed towards the end it was only sewing one side, so I just readjusted that piece. Okay, now I'm pushing this. Okay. So I just went over that section real quick. And now I'm going to go over this section a bit more. So I'm just seam ripping the corner that I want to look really neat for this part of the collar. And I'm just going to go over that one more time just to make sure the collar stand comes out the way I want it to. Okay, and now I'm gonna flip that inside out a bit, clip off my extra threads. Flip off all the extra, and then take my pins out. So take all these pins out. And then I could also serge this on the inside, but I'm not going to serge it on the inside. I'm actually going to serge it on the bottom. So let me show you how this looks now. You see how when I flip that on the inside out, now you don't see any of that lighter, not lighter, but like the non-shiny part. Now let me show you what that looks like on the top, what that collar is going to look like on the top. Okay, so let's walk over to this top, and the way the collar is going to go on here, it's going to be like so. It's a very dramatic collar. I'm gonna fold that so it goes back to there. Hold on, let me pin it so you guys can really see. So the collar goes on like that on the blouse, and then this is going to get finished at the top, right? This is going to get finished at the top, and then so it has that, like, it has like a little opening right there above the collar stand, and then over here when this crosses over, this is going to be a diamond button. Okay, so this is going to be a rhinestone button. And again, once we iron this flat, it'll look much more neat and pristine. We have to press this. So I'm about to attach the collar onto the top. Sew this on the inside. And then our last step is to press that before we do the hems. Let me show you what the demo one is. Hold on, let's see. That's a pretty color, thank you. Okay, look. So this was the one I made for my other client. So that's the copy of the blouse that we're making. That's the design I made for another client a couple weeks ago. And then I had another customer say, can you make me this in this teal color to match her son's wedding? So we're just making a dupe of this design that I made a couple weeks ago for another client. Okay, so let's go back to the blouse. I like how this is looking so far. The collar is going to be a really good match to the other one. So now we're just going to take this off of here. Take this whole blouse off so that we can serge this on. And I really can't wait to press this out, because when we press it out, the collar will look even bigger a little bit. So that'll be really nice. All right, so let's take this off of our mannequin and let's serge the top of that collar. Hi, I see you guys saying hi. That's a pretty color. How do you do that? I'll also upload this live after I'm finished so you can see how I started cutting the pattern as well. Yeah, because I cut the pattern first for you guys. I'm going to just make sure this is a little bigger. Somehow this looks skinnier. Excuse me. I don't know why. Can y'all see me adjusting this over here? I'm just looking at this compared to the other one. So this is the collar pattern that I was using too, just so you know. I was just copying another collar pattern. Right now I'm trying to see which one I even want. Like if I want this one or that one. I think I'll go with this one. All right, so now we're just gonna serge that. So I'm gonna switch this around. What is that picture? I have a whole bunch of artwork in here, which is my sister's artwork. I have a whole bunch of artwork throughout my store, which is paintings by my sister. She did all of the pieces in here. So all the artwork in my store, it's just me promoting my sister's artwork. Somehow I became a fashion designer and she became a painter, and our parents are not creative at all. So, but yeah, let's get back to sewing. Okay, so now I'm going to put the collar on the blouse. I'm gonna move you guys closer in a second. Okay. Let me move you guys closer so you can see what I'm doing on the sewing machine. Let's see here. Okay, so basically for this part of the blouse, which is going right under the collar stand, I just need to sew this on the inside so this then has a clean edge. So I'm just gonna go underneath the shirt, turn it inside out, and do a clean edge at the top of that. So I'm just gonna straight stitch that backward. So turning that inside out, and we're gonna do that clean edge. So let's do that. I'm only doing it about an inch and a half to 2 inches. Alright, let's clip that. And we're going to do that on the other side too. So on the other side, I'm just turning that inside out. I'm going to straight stitch the right sides together. Alright, so now that we now that we straight stitched that, I'm going to clip off the excess threads from the inside. I like to clip as I go so that I don't have a whole bunch of strings and stuff to clip once I get to the edge. I'm sorry, the end of sewing something. So I always clip as I go. Alright, so now we're going to turn the shirt back inside out as you see the shoulder seams, etc. and that crossover ledge. Alright, so now that we are at this part, look, you're going to see how nice and clean that edge looks. So look how that looks now. So now you don't see any of that phrase. It's just a nice corner edge because we sewed that on the inside. You see that? So same thing on the other top of the collar. My store is called Oxymoron Fashion House on Instagram. My personal brand is called Monique Shop, which is the name of this channel, but my store is called Oxymoron. All right, so again, I'm poking that edge a bit just to kind of get that edge to look like a nice right angle. So I'm poking that out a tiny bit, but look how clean that edge looks. And then we're about to put our collar onto the top of the blouse. And with our collar, I'm going to pin it before I serge it, okay? So we're going to start back here, right here, and we're going to pin the collar all the way around that edge. We're going to straight stitch, and then we're going to sew it. I'm sorry, serge. So we're going to do that. And I usually pin every couple inches, like so. So we're just going to go around and make sure that's all pinned so that while we're sewing, it looks nice and neat. Actually, let's go around here. don't know why that pen is getting on my nerves so bad. Yeah, but we're just going around and pinning. You said good luck. Thank you. All right, so while we're pinning that, I'm actually going to go and cut the next pattern. Hold on, give me a second. Let me see. Let me see if this pattern is going to work. Before we sew anything, it's always better to measure twice and cut once. So I like to double check the measurements just to make sure everything is perfect before I sew. So even if I have to measure 3-4 times, I'd rather do that than sew something on and then have to re-sew something later. So I'm just double checking my measurements just to make sure everything is correct. Yeah, so I might go over this one more time. Yeah, I might go over this one more time. For the collar stand. So I'm gonna cut a second collar stand. Hold on. Let me just cut a second collar stand to see which one fits better. So for the pattern for the collar stand, I'm going to which piece, because this is extra. I'm gonna use this extra cut of fabric. Yeah, we're gonna use that. And then I'm just gonna fold this in half. And I'm just going to use this as a demo measurement for our collar stand, and then I'll measure it again later after I put it together to see which one is a better fit. And there's no huge difference here. I'm just going to turn that down. It's going to be kind of difficult for you guys to see this, but for the collar stand, I just need the rough shape of it before I sew it. And I'm just going to even out that edge right there. And I'm just trying, make because keep in mind everything is going to have a 1/2 inch seam, so I'm trying to keep that in mind, like over measure, so that when I do the seam allowance, it still leaves me some space. What am I making? I am making the collar for a blouse. I'm making the collar stand for a blouse that I am putting together. Well, I'm making a blouse. All together, I'm making a blouse. But the part I'm on right now is the collar. And I'm just stitching that 1/2 inch seam allowance in there. I'm just tightening that up a bit and using this part of my machine to tear the threads. And then I'm just going to do a 1/2 inch on the other side as well. Just folding that in slightly to do that 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm just tapering that out towards the serge right there, because we already did the base of that, right? So when we put the collar stand on here again, so we're doing a second collar for this blouse, a second collar option. I just wanted to see which one looked better for like the wider collar. All right, so when you put the collar stand on here, you're sandwiching in the collar in between the collar stand front and back piece, and then when you fold it inside out, it then looks perfect. So right now I'm sandwiching it in. Sandwiching in the collar stand and just pinning that collar in between there. And I'm going to pin at a couple spots along the collar stand just to make sure that as we're sewing, we have a nice, neat finish here and we don't, slip all around with this satin material. So I'm just pinning to make sure everything stays put while I'm sewing. Okay, so we're doing that right there. And we're going to go to the other side and same thing, we're just going to pin that all the way around every couple inches just to make sure that when we sew this down, nothing moves around all crazy and we're sandwiching it in that collar in between the collar stand. And I'm just pulling that there. Perfect. And I'm just pinning towards the end. Okay, so now we're going to start sewing that collar stand down. And we're starting from the end of here. All right, so now that we finished that collar stand, we're going to clip our threads throughout, and we're just going to take all of our pins out that we placed in there to keep our pattern pieces aligned. So we're just going to take all of our pins out, and I literally just stick my pins in my table. So now that we sewed that collar stand, easy peasy. Now we're just going to again clip our threads. We're going to clip as we go because we don't want to have a mess of all these threads at the end. But look, so now that we remember, we sewed our collar stand downward, right? And we sandwiched our collar in between that. Now we flip that inside out. You see, we flip that inside out. Flip that inside out, nice and neat. And now we have our collar. So hold on, let me show you what that collar is going to look like on the blouse, and how that, because this is an oversized collar flap, right? That's going to be on that blouse. So this is the collar stand, the top of the blouse. This is where that top button is going to go on the blouse. And when it's nice and pressed, it's going to hang down super dramatic from the collar of the blouse like that. Okay. So now let's work with this. Let's attach it to our blouse. Okay. Let's attach this to our blouse. Let's pin this all the way around. Again, every couple inches so that the pattern pieces are nice in place. I'm just going around and pinning that collar down nice and neat where I want it to be on or around the neckline. And now I'm pinning to the center back of the collar and the blouse, and we're just literally putting the collar, we're attaching the collar to the blouse now, you guys. Next, we're probably going to do that buttonhole that I talked about. And I'm just, again, measuring, just making sure that measurement is perfect. I want this a little bit further back. Measure twice, cut once, or measure twice, sew once. I always double check my measurements because I don't want to sew something down and then have to take it out. So just double measure what you're doing before you put it on. That way you don't have to seam rip anything. Okay, so now let's attach this collar to our blouse. After this, we're gonna switch to the serge machine and serge it. Look at y'all. You see? You guys, you see how I be doing stuff and I say measure twice, cut once. This is backwards. The reason why it's backwards is because this center seam on the blouse, on the collar, should be the other way. So now I have to take out that half stitch that I just did. That's why I said just double check your stuff before you sew it down, because it's annoying to have to seam rip, but luckily I didn't finish that full stitch before I realized. So now I have to switch that upside down, just because that seam right there should be at the bottom. So I'm going to flip that the other way. Take my pins out. Let me see if I can, yep, because I didn't close that stitch yet. Fairly easy to just go through here. And now at the top of that, we're going to seam rip our back stitches, because I did close in that seam pretty well. And now we're going to flip that to this side. You see how that's on the bottom? We're flipping that to this side. And now we can align that up so that we can sew. So that's why I always just say, just double check what you're doing before you sew stuff down, because it is annoying to have to seam rip stitches. Luckily that wasn't that bad. That was 2 seconds of our lives. Not too bad, not too bad. But again, I should have looked at that at least one more time before I stitched that a little bit. And again, I'm just going around and pinning that collar piece in place again. That way it doesn't move as we're sewing. And with fabrics like this, sometimes it can move because it is like a shiny sheen type fabric. So sometimes it does slip under your sewing presser foot a little bit. So it's just better to always pin your pattern pieces in place, even if it's slightly far apart. That way it doesn't move too far off course. All right, let's try this one more time, you guys. I want to pull this back a little bit, just a tiny bit. Okay, I'm probably doing about ½ inch of a seam allowance. And I'm just moving the collar as I go around. And I kind of always just feel for the fabrics underneath to make sure I'm sewing through all the layers. Okay, and I back stitch that edge. Take these pins out, and now I'm going to go over to the serge machine and serge it. Put these pins back in my table. Now I want to serge all these edges. And then look, once that collar is on there, look how that looks on the blouse. And keep in mind, this is going to be a diamond button where it crosses over. hold on. This is going to be top stitched and overlapped, and then that collar on that blouse is going to kind of hang down like that on the blouse. If you can see how this is coming together really well so far. Some of these, okay, so we're just gonna, I just want to put this piece, I want to align this with the armhole a bit, top stitch this inner piece down. And we're probably going to serge this as well. All right, now let's switch over to the serger. Okay. Switch over to our next machine. So now we're switching over to our 4 thread. If you can see my serger over here. Okay, so now that inner part of the collar, we are going to serge her with a nice pretty seam there. Okay, so now instead of all those flyaways, now our collar has a nice pretty serge. Okay, so now there's not those flyaways on the top of the collar in there. Just a nice pretty serge finish. And I'm also going to do that to a couple of the seams on the inside here. Why is this attaching to that? Something right here needs to be adjusted. Is it this part? I'm just looking at the opposite side of this. Something on this sleeve is caught. I'm gonna have to fix that little pull right there on the sleeve when I'm done, just to make sure that's all proper. Okay. Now that that part is done, I'm going to top stitch the collar. Alright, so now that is serged, we're going to top stitch the collar back to our straight stitch machine. This is all I do all day, is switch around this table to go back and forth. Alright, so again, now we are top stitching this part down. Just so the collar stand can have an even better neat finish, we are top stitching the serge on the inside. We're top stitching that down. So we're just going to go around like so. I'm just moving some of the fabric from underneath. It's about 1/4 of a seam allowance for this top stitch from the collar stand seam. And again, you just want to feel underneath, make sure that you're not going over anything you don't want to go over. Alright, and then that's it for that. And we're just going to top stitch. If you see how I top stitch that seam, just so you can see. That's all we did. We just top stitched that seam so that the collar stand, as it's folded down, the collar stand just has a little bit more weight on it. It just stands a little bit more straight if it's top stitched. Let me move this up a little bit. Okay. So we just top stitched that. Oh, look, you see this here? This is what I'm talking about when you have to double check that all your seams are in the patterns. So look, we have to go back over that. Probably top stitch that underneath. And look, okay, so always double check. And that's the good thing about just being meticulous with each area of what you're stitching, because then you'll know if you missed anything. So I'm going to top stitch that as well. Or should I say top stitch or back stitch? I'm going to stitch on that seam line just to go over that, because again, that's on the inside so nobody sees it, but it's still, you want to top stitch that so nothing comes off there. Yeah, you just want it to look nice and neat from every side, even the inside. Even the inside you want to look nice and neat. So I just got a nice little top stitch right there. Yeah, you see how that seam isn't going to show at all? But still, you want it to be nice and neat. I'm even going to double back over there just to make sure. Okay, so now our collar stand is in place. And the inside is going to look just as neat as the outside, right? That is the goal. And this one little stitch right here, we want to clean that stitch up a little bit. So right now I'm just cleaning up the stitches on the inside to make the outside look just as neat as the inside. I'm sorry, yeah, the inside look just as neat as the outside. So I'm just cleaning up some of my stitches before I go over and do my last little bit of hems. Then after that we have to put the zipper in the skirt that matches this blouse, and we have to put the button on this collar, and then we have to press it because everything has to be ironed nice and neat as well. Alright, so just making sure all those seam lines look really good before we serge to close those in. Okay, so let's clip that and let's check the outside, and that looks much better. You see, I just wanted that flat seam on the outside, and when we press that, that'll be even flatter. But if it's not flat during your stitch, it for sure is not going to be flat when you press it, you know? So you want to make sure that that's nice and flat all around the armhole so that when you actually press it, it looks even better. Okay, so now I'm going to hem the top. And again, I always say cut as you go. Cut as you go. What are we doing? Do I want to seam line this together? Alright, so I'm hemming the bottom of the blouse, 1/2 inch. Again, everything is going to be pressed. Also, if you notice my fingers down here, I'm kind of holding that 1/2 inch seam allowance with my finger as well. Alright, so now we have the bottom of the blouse fully hemmed, and now we're going to hem the sleeves. Keep in mind we still have to sew feathers on the bottom of the sleeves, but we're going to hem them first. So let's hem that at a 1/2 inch as well. This is looking more like 3/4, so let's push that to a 1/2. Okay. Again, we're going to clip as we go. So after you finish your stitch, you clip your stitches. Clip as you go so that you have a nice and neat design at the end. Okay, now we have that one sleeve hemmed, and we're going to hem our other sleeve. Okay. Alright, so again, clipping my stitches as I go for this blouse. And now I'm going to do the buttonhole. Okay, let me see. Beautiful fingers. Okay, thank you. Um, Alright, so now that our blouse is almost done, we're going to put that buttonhole right here. Now for our buttonhole foot, let me turn it a little bit. Or all right, I am getting a call from a customer, so let me hop off this live and I'll hop back on when I sew on the feathers. Thank you guys for tuning in.